and felt pretty excited about. It transfers the responsibility and the pain for a government shutdown that we saw so many of our workers endure to the folks who are actually the decision makers. So the members of Congress, the members of the executive office of the president, and puts the pain on the decision makers instead of people like the TSA worker, the FAA employee. The origin of this bill came to pass when a number of us were hearing very loudly from our districts when we went home. Why is it that government shutdowns are a tool that our government can use when they can't agree? And we were hearing the extremely painful stories from people who couldn't pay their rent, who couldn't pay their bills, and who were asking us why we are the only country in the world that actually shuts down our government when we can't have agreement on a new Appropriations Act. So a number of us started talking. We decided that while we weren't in, for the most part, the negotiations on the current shutdown that was going on in January, there was some things that we could do with fresh eyes as freshmen to help make sure that we aren't in this situation again. So we started talking about the legislation. I'm going to turn it over to a few folks here to walk through the actual guts of it, why we did it, and then take 4 questions at the end. So let me turn it over to Chrissy Houlihan to start us off.
And thank you, Alyssa. Let me see if you guys can hear me. And good afternoon. My name is Chrissy Houlihan, and I represent the people of the Pennsylvania 6th, which is just west and north of Philadelphia. And as Representative Slotkin said, the SES, or the C's bill was born from the experience of the new members of Congress who were sworn into government during a shutdown. This, in fact, is our very first full day as members of Congress. This legislation would incentivize the executive and legislative branches to work together, as the Constitution was frankly designed, to find solutions to very difficult issues rather than punish the very people that we are here to serve. So the bones of this legislation are as follows. There's an automatically triggered 30-day continuing resolution if Congress fails to pass a full year of appropriations bills. And after that 30 days under the automatic CR, if Congress still has failed to pass a spending bill, things begin to get very difficult on both sides of Congress and the executive branch for the people who are in Congress and in the executive branch. So for the Congress, the use of any government funds would be prohibited for member travel. For the 116th Congress, the one that we're in right now, member pay would be held in escrow. And for future Congresses, members' pay would be suspended and not held in escrow. There would be a requirement after that 30 days for a daily quorum call so that we would come together every day to get together and work on this issue. For the executive branch, similarly, the use of federal funds for executive branch officials and travel would be prohibited unless a cabinet secretary issued a waiver for security or emergency purposes. And finally, bonuses and relocation expenses, other financial awards would be prohibited to senior executive branch officials as well. And lastly, on a general scale, federal funds would be prohibited for official receptions and representation of expenses and for the operation of any federal exercise facility or golf course. So I'm, by way of background, an engineer, and among other things, I look for quantifiable and discrete measurable outcomes, and that's what I look to for a bill to be effective and important. And so this bill would provide the following outcomes. It would prevent federal workers from being furloughed or forced to work without pay if Congress and the President failed to agree on appropriations bills. It would protect federal workers from being used as pawns during policy negotiations. And most significantly, it would transfer the financial hardship from the federal workers to the pockets of the President's senior staff and to the members of Congress themselves. We look forward very much to garnering more support for C's, and we look forward to putting this to the floor for a vote. And with that, I will hand it over to Representative Dean Phillips, who will talk to you a little bit more about this bill.
Thanks, Chrissy. I'm Dean Phillips from Minnesota's very frozen 3rd District. And like most Americans, I thought after the 2016 election that we had hit rock bottom as a country. But as evidenced and demonstrated by the past month, that wasn't the case. We have sunk even deeper. And the stories that I heard, like my colleagues, from people in my district who were directly affected by the shutdown, those indirectly affected, left an indelible mark on me. And the erosion of the safety and security and, frankly, international reputation of our country affected me as well. And like my colleagues here today, I ran for Congress to encourage a return to respectful discourse, a return to process, and a return to regular order. The Shutdown to End All Shutdowns Act is a small but very important step in our effort to eliminate a mutually destructive tactic from the political toolkit for all time to come. We are also eager to work with Senator Warner, who has offered similar legislation in the Senate, with our own leadership, and perhaps most importantly, with our colleagues across the aisle, to pave a new and more principled path forward for all of us. And with that, I turn it over to my colleague, Colin Allred.
Well, thanks, Dean. I'm Colin Allred. I represent Texas's 32nd Congressional District. And like my colleagues have said, we ran for Congress and came here to bring fresh ideas and new leadership. This shutdown has shown that something has to change. In my former profession, as a NFL linebacker, we had something called accountability, where if something went wrong, it had to be corrected. This act is our attempt to move in that direction. We are trying to make sure that shutdowns as a policy lever become a thing of the past. As I went around my district and spoke with my constituents, they did not understand how the shutdown lasted as long as it did, or some of the mechanisms that were not employed to try and reach a faster resolution. We are trying to incentivize that and force that to happen. We are the restorers of confidence. We came here to reform this Congress, to do everything we can to bring the spirit of our campaigns and our districts to Washington. And that's what this act is an attempt to do. And I am proud to join with my freshman colleagues. As a freshman class co-president, I can tell you that there's a lot of interest in our class in seeing this Congress reformed, in seeing this town work better. And we are trying very hard to do that. And this is one of our first steps in that direction. So with that, I'll turn it over to my colleague from the great state of Iowa, Cindy Axne.
Thank you so much. I'm Cindy Axne. I'm from Iowa's 3rd District. And I was sent out here, like all of the people that you see standing on the stage, because we wanted to make sure that government started functioning for the people. We've seen all too often government being shut down, not just by Republicans, but by Democrats as well, as a mechanism to move forward. That's absolutely unacceptable. We're here today because we know that that's not the pathway forward. We should never, ever put our hardworking people across this country, whether they are federal workers, whether they are our farmers who have lost out, our small business owners who are losing out on opportunity right now, we should never put them in harm's way because of decisions that can't be made because of Washington's dysfunction. After spending a decade in state government in Iowa, my job was to shore up efficiencies, create accountability, and put government to work in better ways so that we could save taxpayer dollars money. What we're trying to do here hits on all of those things. When we cause a government shutdown because of dysfunction here in Washington, we cost this country billions of dollars, and individuals are faced with extreme hardships. So I am more than honored to be standing here with my fellow freshmen who are ready to help make these changes so that we continue to operate government the way that it should be for the people and making sure that we stand up for the democracy in this country. Thank you. Oh, and next we have Angie Craig from the great state of Minnesota.
That's how cold it is there. There's 2 of us here today. Hello, I'm Angie Craig, and I represent Minnesota's 2nd Congressional District. It's clear that America deserves better than the current dysfunction in Washington that caused the longest shutdown in U.S. history, the one that we inherited as freshmen. Over the past week, we've worked together to put forward solutions that end shutdowns in this country forever, the destructive tactic that's been used by both parties. This puts the pressure on the folks where it should be, not on our hardworking federal workers and the services that Americans depend on the executive branch and on the legislative branch to get back together and work things out in a timely fashion. The truth is, what we've been doing in this country is no longer working. Since 1976, we've had 22 continuing resolutions and I believe 10 shutdowns. This freshman class is absolutely committed to working together to find and figure out how we do this different. And we look forward to approaching our colleagues across the aisle to help make this happen. Thank you. Oh, sorry, I forgot who I'm introducing. And from the great state of Nevada and one of my favorite towns, Las Vegas, Susie Lee. And you guys faked me out. All right, cool.
Another
Oh, in Iowa, Abby Finkenauer.
Thank you, Congresswoman. First, I just want to say thank you to my colleagues up here. We are a freshman class that got sworn in the middle of a shutdown. And I tell you, this was actually, I'm going into now my 5th year in public service. And I had one of the hardest calls I have ever had just a few weeks ago from one of my constituents who's a Farm Service Agency rep. And he talked to me, and he, was proud of our state. He's proud of the work that he does. He's proud to be able to help farmers like himself. And but he was worried, and he was worried about his future. He was worried about his colleagues. And he told me he didn't call to complain because that's not what Iowans do, but he had every right to. But he called because he was worried about, again, his colleagues. And the ones who, for example, had to go back to work after, or were getting called back to work, having to pay for childcare on top of not getting their paycheck. And he asked me what we can do and how can I stop this. And again, one of the most heartbreaking conversations I have ever had. And I promised him in that conversation that I would do everything I could to make sure that this did not happen again and not on our watch. And that is what this bill is. That is why I'm proud to stand here today with my colleagues who got together and thought, how do we fix this in the future? How do we cut down on the chaos and the dysfunction in Washington, D.C.? Because quite frankly, our workers are never to be used as hostages in negotiation by this administration or the next, or this Congress, or the next. And we must do better. So that is what this bill does. It's why, again, I am proud to stand here today, because it's about time we break down on that chaos and that dysfunction. We get back to work, and we do, as we said to all of our constituents that we said we were going to do, which again, work hard, take their voices here, and again, never forget who we're fighting for, and it's the American people and it's working families. Thank you.
Okay. So now we'll take 4 questions. Sorry, we're in a little bit of a time crunch. Apologies. Sir, yes, our tour guide to get here. Thank you for. He picked up a bunch of us freshmen because we didn't know how to get to the room, and you're welcome to use that on the record. So thank you for getting us here.
There's been talk in this instance, Senator Graham has talked about maybe trying to attach the debt ceiling to these conference committee talks. My point is that the idea that sometimes if you were to have these automatic tripwires that kick in, that eliminates the possibility to maybe marry issues together and actually kind of make the sausage. Sometimes it helps the process. You put something on, you put something on there. By taking that out, are you concerned that that might actually backfire in some way and limit the ability to actually get things done, because you can't then add these things in if you get right up to a crisis?
Would anyone like to take that?
Well, Chad, if I might just, this is really a statement of principles as much as it, these are teeth that we hope never would be used anyway. It's a statement of principles that what we saw happen was 800,000 federal employees be furloughed or go without pay and asked to come to work while members of Congress and the executive branch continued to receive their paychecks. And this is about alignment of incentives, if you will, a statement of principles. And it is not perfect, but it is as perfect as we can see as a path forward. And not to mention, it's as perfect as we believe we can achieve by also trying to get some bipartisan support for it. It's a beginning, and we hope to work with the Senate and other propositions in the House to find some resolution in the way forward. But American people, we've listened. Yeah. And we've listened far and wide, and everybody with whom we speak is saying the same thing, that this is an appropriate step in the right direction. And that's why we're bringing it to the floor, we hope.
Yes, ma'am.
So, I'm Megan Freshman here, for those of you who don't know. I heard you all talk about the federal workers, and I heard you all talk about the people who were affected by the shutdown, but I also want to specifically ask about federal government contractors who are affected and aren't going to receive back pay. Does this bill address any of that? And if not, what provisions do you hope to put in place to protect those workers as well?
I'm going to ask Kendra to come in.
Hi, Kendra Horn. I represent Oklahoma's 5th Congressional District, great state of Oklahoma. Thank you for that question. I think that's a very important part of the conversation. This bill, in large part, is intended to deter any future shutdowns. As several of my colleagues have said, we came into this shutdown without the ability to prevent it from happening. And it's our desire, especially after speaking with people in our districts, watching the impact that this has, that we are able to put into place stopgaps and provisions that would keep us from actually getting there in the future. I know there are a number of pieces of legislation that have been introduced to help fund the back pay for federal contractors. I don't know about many of you, but I happen to be a co-sponsor on some of those. And by this legislation preventing the shutdown, it should prevent in the future contractors from losing their pay. Because again, it's about the decision makers having the responsibility and us taking the responsibility that we should have to take care of the programs and the federal employees, and acknowledging the impacts on the economy that happen when we are in the middle of a shutdown.
Ma'am, up front here.
Leanne with NBC. Have you gotten any indication from leadership, from Pelosi in particular, that she would bring this to the floor?
Yeah, so we've had some positive signals. The speaker is aware of what we've been doing. And over the weekend, she said some positive things about being willing to consider legislation generally that would prevent future shutdowns, and not the specific contours of our bill, but as a general concept. We were very happy to see on Meet the Press Leader McCarthy do the same thing. So we think there's real momentum at this moment. I think you've probably seen a number of bills that are floating around that people are proposing both on the House and Senate side. As far as I'm concerned, I think most of us here, that's a good thing, right? That is a solvable problem if we've got different versions of the same bill that ends shutdowns. But we've had very positive signals from the Speaker's office. They've been kept abreast.
Do you want it passed before the February 15th deadline?
So we haven't talked about that as a group. I think we acknowledge that this was always supposed to be prospective and looking forward. We found ourselves as freshmen here during a government shutdown that we inherited. We were not in the room when our leadership and when the president and his team were trying to hash out the deal that they came to on Friday. That was not our responsibility. So we took advantage of looking at things that we could try and affect. And that's the prospective piece. I don't think anyone's under any illusions that this will play into the February 15th deadline, although I hope, given momentum, it's soon after.
Yeah. I might add one more thing. We have respect for how things work here. And after a month of being members of Congress, we also recognize what doesn't. And we have about 20 co-sponsors of this bill already, 21. We just got another one. And it's incumbent on us to sell it and promote it to our own leadership, to our fellow Democrats, and equally importantly, to the other side of the aisle. We came here trying to do things a little bit differently and respect the process, but also try to encourage a little bit of change, which is why we're here today.
Sir.
I was going to ask about the February 15th deadline, but if you look in the Senate, there's also a bill from Senator Portman that the longer time went on, there would be cuts, which I know a lot of Democrats don't like that model. But it seems like, is there a way to bridge these two party visions here? One that doesn't have cuts going on, another one that Republicans really want cuts. How do you come to a negotiation, reach an agreement to bridge those?
Yes, I'm going to ask Representative Malinowski to hit at this one, but I definitely think there's possibilities.
Yeah, there's the common ground is that shutdowns should not happen. The common ground is that it's crazy that we are the only country in the world that allows them to happen. And unfortunately, just saying that again and again isn't enough. We need some safeguards in law to make sure this doesn't happen again. And we are heartened by the fact that Republicans are putting forward proposals and that our leadership on both sides is open to proposals. The sweet spot is finding something where the incentives are neutral, so that, number one, the government stays open and federal workers aren't punished and the American people aren't deprived of vital services, and number two, the pain that is inflicted on us by not having agreement on a budget is evenly shared, so that no side has an incentive to not agree. And we do have some concerns. I have concerns about the 1% cut because I fear that some people might actually see that as a good deal and thus have an incentive to to not agree. I worry a little bit about simply saying that there will be a recurring CR, because anybody who likes the budget that was passed last year might have an incentive to not agree because you just get to keep that forever. So we tried to devise something that would hit, where the penalties would hit senior people in both the executive and legislative branches equally, and within the Congress, both parties equally, so that we would all have the same incentive to come to agreement.
Thank you, everybody, for coming out. I want to be respectful of everyone's time up here and in the audience. Appreciate everything you've done. We think we have the right bill at the right time with the right combination of people and the right will to get something done. So look forward to talking with you more about how we proceed. Thanks very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.